A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Shota Rustaveli and the rebellious Kipchak, this unknown knight. Parliament in a yurt. A warrior inspired by the spirit of the lion. Honored wanderer. Volcanic rocks and endless crossroads. Tourists are told about the cave town of Upletsitske, where the Queen Tamara used to live. In that high tower used to live Queen Tamara. She was beautiful as an angel in heaven, but she was also treacherous and evil as a demon. The most famous literary work about the Queen has absolutely nothing to do with the real Queen. All these romantic atrocities just Lermontov's mistakes. It seems that he confused one historical character with another, but the real Queen also had enough of riddles. The lion, which serves Tamara the Queen, keeps her sword and shield. I, the singer, what kind of work should I do for her? Shota Rustaveli, the knight in the panther's skin. Wonderful deeds, a majestic temper, and the mysterious author of these lines, Georgia, at the end of the 12th century, a mysterious story. Shota Rustaveli and the Kipchak, Kutlu-Arslan. We can trace relationships with Kipchaks from the 12th century. The biography of Shota Rustaveli needs deeper studying. The word Shota in Kazakh and Turkic languages means a half-blooded person or a man of several bloodlines. Chapter 1. This Unknown Knight. If you believe the chroniclers, Tamara was very beautiful, but only legends were left after the poet who wrote about her. Shota Rustaveli is authentically Georgian. He's one of the most famous Georgian writers.
Одним из самых известных грузинских писателей.
His name, surname, and place of birth, and his parents, yes, actually everything is unclear and still vague. It's generally believed that he was born in a place called Rustavi, and there are several such places in Georgia, and this judgment is based only on his surname, Rustaveli. His biography is based on all sorts of legends. Basically, biographers are guided by what Rustaveli himself wrote in the prologue to his famous poem. According to the legend, Shota lost his parents when he was a child, and he was brought up by his uncle. Then he studied at the best educational institutions in Georgia and abroad. He also studied in Greece and in other countries. He mastered philosophy, theology, poetry, astrology, astronomy, Greek and Latin languages. And he returned to Georgia when Tamara reigned. Allegedly, he was in love with the queen, but his love was unrequited. Shota, according to the legend, was a treasurer. Only one document has survived, signed by the treasurer, Shota. There is no mention of him in the chronicles. It's amazing that nowhere and no one before the 17th century even wrote about the poem wearing a leopard skin. There are no references to other creations of Rustaveli. At the same time, text analysis allows researchers to assert that the author of the poem was a contemporary of the Queen. He calls himself an unknown mesh. When the Tsarina Tamara began to remove the Kipchaks from power, and they were removed from the army, they lived mainly in the area of Akhisya, Mesk. There's also an assumption that Shota Rustaveli was Tamara's cousin, Prince Demna. Her father, George III, pushed him away from the throne, blinded and disgraced him. He could have been on the throne, but then this uprising was suppressed. It's doubtful that the crippled prince would write about the glory of the queen who pushed him away. On to the next version. The author is the second and favorite husband of Tamara, David Soslan, which is unlikely too. There's too much bitterness of undivided feelings in the poem. And another version, the well-known Knight in the Panther skin, was written by one of Tamara's close friends, a Kipchak by origin. Chapter 2. Parliament in a Yurt. I had a reed for a pen and for ink, an agate lake. Who listened to my creations was smitten with a blade. Shota Rustaveli, the knight in the panther's skin. What is so dangerous about what Rustaveli's done when his supporters have been smashed by a blade? The poet does not give any special explanations on this matter. Can the history of the reign of Queen Tamara somehow clarify the situation? Meteki Temple on the banks of the Kura. It's believed that the beautiful Tamara went to pray there. She started her royal duties just a few months before, in 1185. There was a struggle around the throne. Everyone wanted to manipulate the young queen. The Georgian feudal lords, so to speak, the Kipchak party. Under Tamara's reign, 3 of the 4 ministers were Kipchaks. One of them is the Minister of Finance, Kutlu-Arslan. Kutlu, or kote, this is a Turkic word for kind. Sometimes it even meant sent. Arslan is quite a common name in the period of the Turkic Khaganate. During the Karahanlids and the Karluks, there is little known about his life. Mostly likely, he was a descendant of those Kipchaks whom David the Builder, the grandfather of the Queen of Tamara, called to service. Kutlu-Arslan was a military commander. He was in the army of Tamara's father, George III. He served, following his faith in truth, and he did not just make a riot, he started a global reform. Incredibly, he started to write the constitution. This is in the 12th century. It's terrible even to remember. Kutlu-Arslan, this mule-like creature coming from the lower strata and gifted with an insidious mind, composed the project and demanded to put up a tent, saying, "While sitting in the tent, we will lead the affairs of pardon and punishment, a decision to report to Queen Tamara, who will enforce them." The history of the praise of the crown. Given the inexperience of the Queen, it seems to be quite a reasonable idea to establish a certain parliament, the Karavi, a peculiar chamber of lords, where the decision would be taken by democratic voting. He was the founder of Georgian parliamentarianism, but not a successful founder. Kutlu-Arslan was for continuing apparently those traditions that were in the Kipchak steppe. The historical chronicles said that the Minister of Finance declared himself also the Minister of War and was preparing to sit down in Somchet in the place of the Armenian king. By the way, according to one of the versions, Shota Rustaveli was from Somhet, the area by that time inhabited mainly by nomads. In northern Armenia, in the lower region, there is a monastery built near the village called Kipchak. But it seems Kutlu-Arslan wanted too much. The queen, the chronicler writes, was surprised and offended. He said that coins, finances, everything should be independent from the queen. The Queen Tamara was extremely unhappy, and she arrested and threw him in prison. Then something strange happened. Kutlu-Arslan had many supporters, and they started a riot. The military, who swore to him, decided to stand firm for the release of Kutlu-Arslan and not to suffer any harm. They were prepared even for a siege, the history of the praise of the crown. It's interesting that the insurrection was suppressed without the use of military force. To negotiate with the rebels, Tamara sent 2 the most venerable women who suggested that the rebels surrender under an oath, and the queen would not punish anyone. The suzerain punishes the vassal. The woman always enters the negotiations. According to the Turkic tradition, men do not go to such negotiations. Kutlu-Arslan was released, his supporters swore allegiance to the queen, and the traces of the rebel minister in history were lost. Nothing else was mentioned about him. The Kipchaks were somewhat ousted from the Georgian court. Maybe Shota Rustaveli was the same Kipchak treasurer, Kutlu-Arslan. Chapter 3. A warrior inspired by the spirit of the lion. Let it burn with the fire of the madman until the last moment. Do not punish me by death for past sins. From Shota Rustaveli, The Knight in the Panther Skin. In confirmation of this version, it's believed that the treasurer Shota was present at the coronation of Tamara, allegedly even read his poem, although a woman, but God affirms the queen. But according to the chronicles, around the same time, there was a treasurer, the Minister of Finance, Kutlu-Arslan. He was a very educated man. After, there were other treasurers. Some are mentioned in the chronicles. Nobody mentioned Rustaveli. Most likely, this is a pseudonym. Just like Kutlu-Arslan, the author of the poem was removed from the court. He had to leave the country, on certain conditions. I was ordered to praise the queen with a new word. There is a suggestion that Tamara released Kutlu-Arslan from prison, although under certain conditions. The one I glorified before, I continue to be proud of. I sing about her and I'm not ashamed. She is dearer to me than life, a ruthless panther. Shota Rustaveli, The Knight in the Panther Skin. He glorifies her and calls her a ruthless panther. The plot of the work is also very strange. Two Tsars who do not have sons, just like Tamara's father, two couples in love, and two villains are the aunts of the main heroines. It's like two parallel realities. The researchers interpreted this as a hint at the double life of a poet. The Hungarian scientist and Turkologist Laszlo Bayandur said that The Knight in the Panther Skin is a set of Kipchak legends. Rustaveli himself wrote that the plot was borrowed from Persian poems. Modern analysts, they recognize more the Georgian origin of this work. The original is not preserved. The poem has undergone many changes until it becomes literary and canonical. It happened around the 17th century under Tsar Vakhtang. By the way, he's also called the possible author of The Knight. The Georgian church, at first, considered the work as heretical, and the books were thrown into the Kura. A mule-like creature, as Kutlu-Arslan calls the chronicler, one can assume that he was physically strong. An image of a man who is powerful enough, strong, but perhaps ugly. And this is rather the argument against it. In the conventional interpretation, Shota Rustaveli is handsome and stately, and there is more about the name of the famous author. He writes in the first person, I'm a lion holding a sword and a cup. In general, it's Arslan. In addition, there was no name for Shota before Rustaveli in Georgia. By the way, the word mule-like is often interpreted as a mestizo mulatto. In the Kazakh language, the word Shota and even the name Shota can be interpreted and translated as a person who's from a different tribe. By the way, the author calls himself simply Rustaveli, presumably from the name Rustvi, a province that belonged to the influential Polovets Abul-Hasan. The poet maybe was born there or he was given these lands after the Kipchaks were removed from power. Epilogue. Honored Wanderer. The poem ends quite happily. True, not for the poet. Definitely, that has his lyrical hero was in love, and love was not mutual. The passion of love made me write this story. Those who are subject to the rati, for me, the light shone. I was struck in my heart. I'm burning in the fire of a crucible. If the luminary does not repent, a crazy grave awaits. From Shota Rustaveli's The Knight in the Panther Skin. How the life of Kutlu-Arslan ended is not known. The same with Shota Rustaveli. It's believed that the poem was written not earlier than 1189. According to one of the legends, after that the poem was killed. According to another legend, he was the Georgian ambassador in Jerusalem and lived until he got very old and was buried in the Monastery of the Cross. It's interesting that it was the same place where the wife of David the Builder, the Kipchak princess Guranduk, found also her peace.